Recap in minutes. In today's video, we will be enjoying an Australian historical war film, entitled Kokoda. There will be spoilers ahead, chill out and enjoy. 10,000 Japanese are on their way to invade Australia via the treacherous trails of Kokoda. The only available forces that are available to stop them are the Chacos, as the Australian Imperial Force, AIF, are overseas against other enemies. The Chacos are considered not fit for combat, but knowing what's at stake, they step up to the challenge. Their primary task is to dig roads and unload ships. Not this time, as their assignment is way bigger and more challenging, and that is to prevent the Japanese from gaining ground and making their way to Australia. The movie begins with Jack Scholl dreaming about being scoped out of the mud. He then looks for his brother, Max. He sees a group of local tribesmen from a distance and goes near them. Badly wounded, Max is carried by some local Papua New Guinean war carriers or fuzzies. Max begs that he checks how nasty his wounds are, but the tribesmen refuse to let him. Reluctantly, Jack unbuttons Max's uniform and is taken aback by the sight of his brother's internal organs that are popping out and a snake that comes out from within. He wakes up and is grateful that it was just a dream. Could it be a bad sign that something similar might happen? Max is asked to get some ammunition by the lieutenant from the quartermaster, as they need them tonight. Meanwhile, while attending to a wounded soldier, a doctor confides to Jack that they lack quinine, among other essential needs. Quinine is a medication used to treat malaria. The doctor then tells Jack that it's not fair for them to be sent to the war zone, being not trained for the adversity that they are in now. This is not what Chacos are meant to perform. The doctor, however, assures Jack that the AIF will be here soon to replace them and that they are in good hands with their lieutenant. The lieutenant orders Corporal Wilstead that Burke is next in line as the machine gunner. He then reminds Wilstead that they will be out again tonight unless the AIF arrives, which is highly unlikely. Wilstead then goes to the soldiers and lets them know that there will be a weapons check in an hour. Blue does not seem to appreciate receiving orders from the young corporal. When the officer leaves, Jack reminds them that they have an hour before their weapons are inspected. Jono excuses himself as he needs to relieve himself. Jack advises to always bring his weapon with him. The Japanese are experts when it comes to jungle warfare. A soldier named Dan arrives, handing everyone a letter other than Darko. This upsets Darko. Blue reads out a result of an Australian Football League, which makes everybody ecstatic despite the danger that they are in. The lieutenant joins them to let them know what lies ahead. He wants everyone to pack light and be prepared, as the Japanese are likely to attack tonight. He checks their arms and enlightens them on the importance of their task. They are at the front line for a reason. He also tells them that the AIF will be here tomorrow. He asks Sam if his stomach is better now. Sam confirms that it is. On the other hand, Burke is suffering from dysentery, but he refuses to tell the officer. The officer shifts his sight to Jack to find out if he was able to secure some quinine from the doctor. Jack confirms that he did. That was a lie. The team heads out to the jungle. Along the way, they come across local carriers transporting wounded soldiers. One soldier remains in high spirits despite being carried. One soldier has a serious eye injury and amputated legs. The team is reminded to keep moving forward since they can't afford to waste time. While manning their positions, the lieutenant hands over a couple of grenades to Max and Blue. They are to use them if necessary. Dan confides to Sam that if only it's not improper to ask for a leave of absence, he'd have requested for it, as he's aware of how vulnerable they are and dangerous their assignment is. Sunset is on its way, and there's still no sign of the Japanese approaching. The lieutenant grabs his binoculars to check if the Japanese forces are headed their way. Right in front of him is Wilstead looking ahead. Both officers are unaware that a Japanese shoulder blends in seamlessly with the grass behind them. The Japanese soldier then comes out and slits the throat of the lieutenant. He dies immediately and lands on Wilstead. Sam takes the Japanese down, and the latter gets killed by Dan. Commotion ensues, and gunshots are fired, but the Australians are having difficulty locating the rest of the Japanese soldiers. They camouflage well and are barely visible. Wilstead is unable to handle the chaos and decides to fall back. The brutality is too much for him. The Australians are now on their own. Darko orders that they fall back as the Japanese have the upper hand in this encounter. Blue covers them by shooting at the Japanese, allowing the soldiers to fall back to safety. They leave without Blue. As soon as the smoke clears, the Chacos get to assess their number. Blue and Jono are not with them while Sam is wounded. Meanwhile, Wilstead hides beneath a dead tree as a Japanese soldier tracks him down. He does everything he can not to make any sound or unnecessary movement. Thinking that he's now safe, he rolls out of the tree only to get caught by a Japanese soldier. He is then stabbed in the face and the eye. Jack is able to radio the base and give them an update about their situation. Before he can fully report, the line gets disconnected. The team shares a laugh as Burke and Sam admit that they soiled their pants in the midst of the encounter. The laughter is cut short as Jono appears crying. He could not find Blue. The team tries to calm him down as he is in a panic mood. Johnny wants them to go back and retrieve Blue. They can't leave without him. Max volunteers to go back and search for Blue, but Jack stops him right away. He wants to go with Darko instead. He asks Sam to go back to Isurava once he's able to walk. Jack also orders Burke that he is now the machine gun operator as Darko is going with him. They then head back to the jungle to look for Blue. Moments later, they see fire and crawl their way to get a closer look. Sam is tied to a tree and tortured. They are helplessly watching Sam being stabbed over and over again. Barely breathing, Sam gets to see them just in time for the Japanese to finish the job and decapitate him. While hiding, Dan arrives to let them know that they've been cut off from the rest of the team. The other soldiers are now back to Isurava. Jack asks him if Max went as well, but before he can answer, Dan gets shot behind his head. He dies instantly and makes Jack hysterical. Darko is able to calm him down. Jack and Darko slowly cross a swamp. Jack stops by to wash his face when all of a sudden, a figure suddenly appears. Darko immediately points the gun at the person. It turns out to be Max. The team is now intact again. Jono is surprised that Blue is not with them. He is then told that the Japanese tortured him to death. Jono is devastated by this news. The team eats the remainder of their ration. Jono is too devastated to eat, so Darko grabs his share instead. The team needs to keep going, but there's one problem. Sam is unable to walk. Max suggests that they make a stretcher and carry him. Jack reminds them that their priority is to protect Isurava. If Sam is unable to proceed, he has to stay. As soon as Jack tells Sam that they are leaving, Sam manages to get up with a little help and uses a crutch to walk. They don't need to carry him after all. After trekking for the entire day while assisting Sam, everyone is exhausted. They rest for the night. The next morning, Sam is no longer there, but he did not leave them. He hides himself in a hollow tree stump to prevent from holding them up. He knows he puts the lives of his team in danger by slowing them down. As the team advances, Jack sees a person and thinks that it's Sam. Before he can get closer, they are ambushed by the Japanese. Max is so badly hit to the stomach that his internal organs are starting to pop out. Jack uses a piece of cloth to put some pressure on it. Meanwhile, one Japanese survives the encounter. Darko then kills him at point blank. Max asks them to leave him behind, but Jack refuses to do that. Instead, they carry him on a stretcher, even crossing a neck-deep river. The team makes it to a village that has already been destroyed by the Japanese. They are able to find a place to take refuge. Darko opens up the idea again of leaving Max behind, as carrying him will only slow them down. Jack is determined not to leave his brother behind. Jack and Drago are on the verge of fighting as they argue about Max's fate. Max butts in and suggests that they leave him behind and have some fuzzies come over and pick him up. Jono volunteers to stay with Max. They all agree. The team buries the dead bodies from that village, then proceeds to head towards Isurava. It's an uphill battle braving the jungle, but a necessary move to stop the Japanese. Jack steps on sticky mud. Upon lifting his boots, the sole comes off. The team takes a breather, then the long journey continues. At night, the team comes across some Japanese soldiers. Darko grabs one Japanese from behind and stabs his neck. Before his comrades can react, Jack throws a grenade while he snatches Darko to safety. The team survives and comes across Australian troops who mistake them for enemies. The soldiers shoot at them, but they are able to convince that they are all on the same team. They are taken to the Isurava, where fuzzies also bring in wounded soldiers. Jack checks every wounded soldier in the hopes of finding his brother. Max is still not there. The Japanese return back to the village where Jono and Max are. When they are about to enter the shelter where Max and Jono are staying, Jono can't afford to stay and wait for the Japanese to discover them. Jono makes a conscious decision to distract them by shooting at them and running away. In doing so, the Japanese divert their attention to him. That plan works as the Japanese chase him instead of going inside the hut. Jack, Darko, and Burke agree to volunteer, as the 8th that arrived are too weak to fight off the Japanese. The 8th already lost the battle even before it started from the treacherous terrains that they had to go through. That night, The Japanese bombard them with all they have, but the Australian forces are prepared and well positioned. They are able to eliminate the Japanese. Burke gets killed during this final battle, but they come out victorious. The next day, a colonel comes in to let them know how their gallantry just saved Australia from the invasion. They are also informed that they have been taken off the line. They can now go back to their families. Holding back his tears, the colonel expresses that they are some of the finest soldiers he's ever seen and that they just made history. While pulling back from Isurava, Jack sees Max being carried by the Fuzzies. Thanks to Jono, Max was not captured by the Japanese. All the three of them make it. Their efforts and sacrifice did not go to waste, as their contribution to their country led to the failure of the Japanese to invade Australia, and for the first time during World War II, the Japanese were stopped. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more videos like this and to help the channel grow.